On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks get into the win column with a pretty dominant performance up in Milwaukee. We'll break it down from every angle and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1577 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here in late October. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And also, I should tell you at the top of the podcast, to make us your first listen each and every day, please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify, as well as YouTube on the video side. And today's show will break down what became a 127-110 road win for the Hawks in Milwaukee. A very, very impressive performance after an 0-2 start from the Hawks. They really played a fantastic game tonight in Milwaukee. They're up by as many as 31 points in the second half of this one. And honestly, the game was not as close as the final 17-point margin would indicate. It was a lot of garbage time in the last couple of minutes, but it was a comfortable 25-ish point win for the Hawks in the actual game flow of this one. A couple of big runs in the first half, and sort of a big lead that they never relinquished. It was pretty comfortable the entire second half, honestly. It was really balanced, a strong effort overall on both ends of the floor. Basically, everyone played well in this game, and they did it also in the toughest spot of the season so far on paper for the Hawks. They were 6-point underdogs in this game, according to our friends at FanDuel, on the road against a title-contending team. The Hawks just played very well in this one. So obviously, we'll talk about a lot of specifics later on. If you're a first-time listener, welcome aboard. What we do on this podcast, kind of go big picture, then we'll drill down to sort of what transpired in this game, game flow-wise, observations that I would have, and also player-by-player breakdowns at the end of the show. But I want to start with the defense, actually, in this game. The Hawks were particularly good defensively in the first half on that end of the floor, as we'll talk about even more in a second. But this is a Hawks team, as I've discussed many times, that is built to be offense first. That's still the case. But there is a certain level that you have to reach defensively to be a real legitimate, high-end team in the NBA. And in this game, we saw the Hawks play very well defensively. They have a 108 offensive rating allowed to the Bucks. That doesn't even tell the whole story, actually. I think the Bucks actually shot the heck out of the ball in the second half. In fact, Milwaukee shot 13 of 22 from three after halftime to kind of save things. And again, at the end, there was some garbage time in there. But the Hawks forced 23 turnovers and allowed only 22 assists. If you have more turnovers than assists, you are not playing good offense, and that's where Milwaukee was in this game. Also, the Hawks allowed 20 free throw attempts. They were good around the rim, not fouling against the Bucks. They held the Bucks to 44 points in the paint. That's a very bad number. Only 7 fast break points. The numbers were really, really good, and honestly, again, until garbage time, it was even better. And yes, the numbers are I guess the full game numbers are not completely dominant, but if you watch this one or followed throughout the game, it really was. And yes, Milwaukee was without Chris Middleton in this game, their third best player. That is at least worth acknowledging. But this is a team in Milwaukee now, after the Drew Holiday, Damian Lillard trade, some other stuff they've done. They are much more of an offense-first team now than they were previously with the way they built their team. Even supporting guys, they're much more offensive than defensive. And the Hawks played very well defensively in this game. Obviously, we'll talk about more of the Damian Lillard saga. He was really struggling in this one. Shouts to the entire Hawks defense for that, including, I would say, headlined by Dejounte Murray. But a really impressive defensive effort from the Hawks. And if they could find that more consistently, that would be big. Offensively, they were also very good in this one, as you might imagine, for a game that they were up by 31 points in the second half. They scored about 1.3 points per possession in the non-garbage time minutes of this one. Ended up with about a 125 offensive rating for the full game. That is an excellent number against anyone, anywhere. And then you throw in, this is a road game against a good team. And yes, Milwaukee's defense is not quite the same as it used to be without Drew and some of the perimeter stuff, but still the Hawks played really lights out on offense. The top 8 guys, and really the only 8 guys that played rotation minutes in this one, all had at least 12 points in the game. No one had more than 20 points. So it does not really get any more balance than the Hawks were in this game. In fact, Trae Young was the only guy on the team that shot less than 44% from the floor out of those 8 players. And he also had 11 assists and got to the line 9 times and was really, really good, I thought, after about the first 5 minutes. So everyone basically played well for the Hawks in this game. And as a team, they were 51% from the floor, 15 of 37 from 3. That is the most attempts they've had so far and the most makes they've had so far. 82% from the line in this game. They were 20 of 24 at the rim. That's an excellent figure, both attempts and especially accuracy. They had 25 fast break points, and part of that was all the turnovers that they created defensively against Milwaukee in this game. but they also executed well in transition to score on those chances. They had 32 assists. They grabbed almost 40% of available offensive rebounds. So in the end, the Hawks had 8 more shooting possessions than the Bucks. So if you don't know what that means, basically is that, inherently you want to take more shots from the field and from the free throw line than your opponent, because even if you don't shoot quite as well, the gap is bridged if you take more shots, because that means you had either or both of a turnover advantage or a rebounding advantage. And the Hawks actually had both in this game. So just playing the math game, and the Hawks, obviously shot well in this game, but it helps, generally speaking, the possession battle gets undervalued, in my opinion. It's a lot of focus on shot making, and certainly that makes sense. But one of my philosophies is like, check and see who takes more shots in the game. And the Hawks took 8 more shooting possessions. That includes free throws than the Bucks, and it's not a small thing. That's actually a lot of win probability added to your particular side of things. Before we move on to the actual game flow, there was a lineup change in this game, which I know got a lot of attention. I did not want to lead with that because this is an awesome performance from the Hawks. This is more of a pregame thing, but a lot of questions about this. So I'll go ahead and answer some of those now. Obviously, Jalen Johnson, if you watched this game or followed it with any closeness, ended up starting in place of Saddiq Bey, who started the first 2 games for the Hawks. I was not surprised at all by this. I did predict this summer, and I think correctly, that Bey would be the starter on opening night. But even then, I was acknowledging I was never sure about that. And I continue to think the entire time that the 4 spot, basically, Jalen versus Saddiq in a lot of ways, which something Quinn Snyder's not really talked about a lot. He doesn't like that framing, but that spot was really the only one that is up for grabs right now for the Hawks. I know people don't necessarily love DeAndre Hunter starting or Clint Capella starting or both, but really it's just come down to that one spot in realistic terms from what I've heard, what I can glean. But if you're a new listener, I'll just say I don't really care as much as other people do about starting lineups. And Jalen did play 29 minutes and 30 minutes in the first 2 games. But there's some questions about the offense and the lack of spacing with Jalen, I would say, in between Hunter and Murray and Capella, because of his not great shooting. But he actually is shooting the ball better and more often now. But he obviously gives them a lot more playmaking on that unit, also a lot more defense and range and athleticism and all that stuff. And look, it could have been somewhat matchup based. It may not be. I will acknowledge that. The Bucks are maybe the matchup, as we saw actually in this game. The Hawks ended up playing Okongwu and Capella together at one point. The Bucks are a matchup where it did not make a lot of sense to have Saddiq Bey out there and Clint Capella out there and DeAndre Hunter out there, because there's not really anybody to guard Giannis that you would want. I think the 2 best defenders on Giannis on this roster are Jalen and Onyeka. So starting neither of them in this game, not great. And look, it could be an overall change as well. I will acknowledge that. As you might imagine, Quinn was asked a little bit about lineup stuff after the game. He committed to nothing, as he is wont to do. He pivoted to saying that it's been good for everybody else to find out that you could play Saddiq and Jalen together. He talked about playing Okongwu at the 4 and how AJ got in there in the second half. But he also praised his team for being coachable and willing to adapt to adjustments about starting or finishing games, which I think was not really a subtle thing. But he did say, and the quote I'm quoting here now from Quinn, "Tonight was a matchup when we started JJ. We can do that." End quote. So they can. I don't know if they will. I would guess. This is a guess now. We're just minutes after the game is over. They do play on Monday. I would guess they're going to stay with this. Would I be absolutely bowled over if they started Saddiq again in the near future? No. But I think after the way this game went and how Jalen is playing, I would guess that they stay with it. But we'll see. And obviously, Jalen, big picture, look, Saddiq Bey is a valuable player. I'm going to be clear about that. He's a really good shooter. I think he's clearly a top 7 guy on this team, top 7 or 8 guy on this team, and for a lot of teams. I think he would start for a lot of teams, etc. But Jalen is just more dynamic than he is. That's very clear, and a much bigger organizational priority for the Hawks. Jalen's upside is way above Saddiq's. I think that's not really breaking news or anything negative about Saddiq. But all that said, Jalen gets a different look. He's really impressed, obviously, not only in front of the camera when it comes to the games, but I've heard great things from practices about Jalen and how he's looked all summer long. Obviously, the buzz is really, really aggressive there. I'm trying not to dump on that because, look, I've always been very high on Jalen Johnson. I know Hawks fans, at least some of them, think that I'm too low on him, and that's fine. But I was a guy that was really celebrating that draft pick when it happened, and I've always been like preaching patience more so than panic when he wasn't playing. And the talent there and the upside there, yes, it was an upside pick, and it was a little bit risky because he had kind of a weird year at Duke, but the talent there was always like crazy to fall to 20 overall in the draft, and we're seeing that now. So get excited about that. I'm totally fine with that. But anyway, big picture, I think it matters less to me than others about the starting lineup, but I do understand there was some celebration there. I got a lot of responses when I tweeted out the lineup. I think I was the first one to break the lineup tonight. And yeah, it obviously worked out very well. So in the end, I expect, or at least I would project them to stay with that. But until we see it again, we won't know for sure. And hold your breath on that if you are a Hawks fan that wants Jalen Johnson to start and play a lot. And he did in this game despite foul trouble. So all that said, we'll have much more on this game coming up in a second. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and PrizePicks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. And at PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 6 players and then choose whether they'll actually have more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You go up to 25 times the money on your entries, and at PrizePicks, you're not competing against other people. It's just you against the numbers. An entry there at PrizePicks can be made in just a minute or less. That makes life easy and quick. And PrizePicks also offers improved deposit and withdrawal experiences, including the option to use Apple Pay for quick deposits. PrizePicks also offers discounts and bonuses, other exciting stuff, including like Taco Tuesday and Flex Friday bonuses and promos. They have a huge selection of sports and stat types not offered anywhere else. They have NFL stuff, NBA stuff, MLB, NHL, PGA, and many, many more sporting offerings. They're operational in more than 30 states now, plus Canada, and PrizePicks is the best way to have action in more than 70% of the country. I've really enjoyed checking out PrizePicks for a long time. I'm digging it all the time there during the NFL season, of course, but now the NBA is going on, and it's really a fun place to dive into that sport as well. And on the whole, the experience is fantastic. It's easy. It's fun. I highly recommend it. You should check it out for sure. And PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA is the place to do so. Use Locked On NBA as a promo code as well for a first deposit match up to $100 with PrizePicks. One more time, that is PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA. Check out daily fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. All right, we'll dive in now to the game flow and the observations throughout this game. The Hawks actually started this game very well, as you might imagine, given the final score. A 12-3 run out of the gate. They had Giannis being covered by Jalen Johnson, as you might expect, considering that he started in this game. Dejounte Murray had Damian Lillard's assignment. I thought DeAndre Hunter was really aggressive out of the gate. He took a pull-up 3 in transition that you don't often see from him. Probably some Quinn Snyder influence there. In fact, the Hawks took 5 threes in about 3.5 minutes, had 3 steals as well, setting a strong tone. Milwaukee missed 8 of their first 9 shots, and it was all very strong. I will say, as I'll probably get into later on, I thought Clint Capella was very good in this game, but he had a rough start. He missed a dunk, which was his 3rd missed dunk or bunny in the last 5 minutes of play, and had a really bad hook shot. Even as someone who often defends Clint Capella, he should take less hook shots, especially over a center like Brook Lopez. That was a bad shot. But he settled in once from that point forward. Basically, he blocked a shot by Pat Connaughton, a couple nice finishes around the rim, and I thought, again, he played very well for the lion's share of this game. Rotationally, one kind of minor surprise. Obviously, Jalen starting was not a huge surprise. We talked about that already on the podcast, and Bey was kind of slotted into his role. But they had to change things up a little bit because Hunter got a second foul very quickly. Jalen came back faster than he would have. But the big change beyond the starting lineup was that AJ Griffin was basically out of the rotation in this game. Now, he played some what I would describe as rotation minutes in the third quarter after Jalen Johnson got his 4th foul, had to sit out for a long time. But AJ didn't play for the first 2.5 quarters. And it wasn't like they played somebody over him. Quinn just kind of played a playoff rotation for the most part. Most of the time, outside of Nick Nurse or maybe if a team has injuries, you don't often see, I won't say you never see, but you don't often see an NBA team, especially this early in the season, playing 8 guys. And the Hawks played 8 guys in the first 2.5 quarters. And when they finally went to the 9th guy, AJ, they were up 20 plus. Now the game wasn't over, but certainly they were very rigid with the rotation in this game, which I don't mind it, but it's a back-to-back. You would almost think that it would be the opposite going into a back-to-back on Monday, because that's usually what happens. But AJ's, as I talked about on the show on Friday night, he's been very clearly the 9th man. He played basically 2 short stints on Friday. But they just trimmed him out of the rotation tonight. So we'll see. Quinn was positive about him after the game, but he played not very much in this one. Anyway, Hawks were up by 15 points by the middle of the first quarter, and that was the largest lead of the season to that point. And obviously, it kept going from there. But Milwaukee was 4 of 18 from the floor. The couple of, it's kind of nitpicking a little bit, but the Hawks passed on some open looks, I thought, in the first half. I thought, in particular, guys that can't pass on shots, like Bogey and Bey, passed on a few. There was one that Bogey was wide open, by the way, and the Hawks just missed him one pass away. Nobody in the picture. It should be an easy extra pass. They just missed it, that kind of thing. Quinn challenged in the first quarter a block by Jalen Johnson. It was a great play by him, by the way. He did win the challenge. It was kind of a weird one because in the past, I would have probably criticized that challenge for being way too low leverage because they won the challenge, but Milwaukee got the ball. So it was like, how impactful is this? But with the new rules, I'm still trying to figure this out. And a lot of people are like, what is the best optimal challenge protocol because they get if you win it now, if you miss this, if you win the challenge now, you actually get it back. So that's something to say. And now they won this one. So just something to note. I talked about this a little bit on the preview that I wrote on Patreon at patreon.com/BT Rowland, but the Bucks don't really have anyone to defend Trae Young now. The Drew Holiday is not there. They have Marjon Beauchamp guarding Trae some in this game. And in the first half, I actually said on Twitter that Trae basically had him in hell because Beauchamp fouled Trae 3 times in about a minute and a half in the first half. And if you look at the roster, this is obviously not a Bucks podcast, but might be a factor in the future. They don't really have anyone that you would say is a good defender against a high-level guard like Trae. Dame Lillard, not a great defender. Cam Payne, the backup point guard, not a great defender. Obviously, Chris Middleton is fine, but he's not really someone who's going to chase around guards. He wasn't available in this game. Beauchamp's maybe their best option on paper, but it's not a great option. Pat Connaughton, et cetera. So something to circle because Milwaukee, Trae wasn't great early on, but once he settled in, he was really, really in control of this game, and the Bucks had no answers for Trae. From there, they actually started second quarter with Okongwu and Capella playing together. And I made this observation on Twitter, and I've said it before. I believe that is the first time the Hawks have ever, and I mean ever, this is year 4, used them together in a non-specialized situation. So they've played together in a defense-only trip in the fourth quarter, or at the end of a quarter, or on a free throw rebound to have size on the floor. But they just played a stint together in this game. Now, as I referenced earlier about Jalen, the Bucks are a unique matchup. So maybe that's why they did this, and maybe that's why they were free to do it because I've always said Okongwu does a great job on Giannis, for instance, and the Bucks play 2 bigs a lot of the time. Even when they're playing Giannis and Portis, they're pretty big. So that makes some sense, but we saw it after all this time, all that talk. We saw it in this game briefly, not a ton, but it was out there. There was one run by Milwaukee in the entire game. It was an 18-5 run in the second quarter to go from 15 down to the lead was down to 2. And I believe we got to 1 at one point in the second quarter. And the Hawks missed 8 shots in a row that kind of allowed that to happen. But unfortunately, there was a 14-0 response from the Hawks mid-quarter to go by 15 points. Jalen had a great attack and finish through contact before timeout. A couple steals from the Hawks. Bogey hit a 3. And then Trae was actually on the bench for that one, but it was fueled by defense. I thought Murray was a huge story defensively in this game. Trae, as I mentioned before, had a really rough start to this game as a shooter. He actually started at 1 of 7. At that point, he was 9 of 42 from the season, from the floor. That's just crazy. But he made it 3 late in the first half, and I thought, again, played very well after the first stint or 2 in the first quarter. The Hawks were up by 21 at the half. They had a 35-15 run to end the half. And really, that was the best half of the season by far. The second half wasn't as good on the whole. It was still pretty good. But in the first half, to beat the Bucks by 21 with all the starters playing other than Middleton, that's pretty impressive. They had a great offensive numbers. They had really, really good balance, 17 assists. The Bucks were 3 of 22 from 3, which certainly helped a little bit on that front. But 9 assists, 9 turnovers. I thought, and I said this on Twitter, I thought it was probably the best defensive half I have seen from Dejounte Murray wearing a Hawks uniform. I was critical of Dejounte's defense for large portions of last season. And look, he doesn't get all of the credit for Damian Lillard going scoreless in the first half, and he did, with 6 turnovers, by the way. But he gets a lot of it. Murray was really good in this game. After the game, Quinn credited him and Capella in particular for that. But look, Dejounte played really well defensively, and I have to tip my cap to him on that. They did a decent job on Giannis as well. I thought Hunter and Bay were pretty good defensively and just great stuff. Now, I know Hawks fans, at least longtime Hawks fans, were probably dreading the start of the third quarter because the Hawks had a really rough start to the third. 0 of 2 from the floor and 3 turnovers on their first 5 possessions. And then a 4th foul on Jalen Johnson, and the lead was down to 17 with Milwaukee having the ball. And from there, it got better, fortunately, for Atlanta. A personal 7-0 run, actually, from DeAndre Hunter, who had his best stretch of the game offensively in that stretch. AJ came in, as noted before. Dame finally scored, but the Hawks did a pretty good job of just being in attack mode. As soon as Brook Lopez came off the floor, the Hawks attacked the rim. Now, I'm always talking about how the Hawks should shoot more threes. They did in this game, and they really weren't in that stretch, but because Lopez is off the floor, it was kind of, I won't say it was a layup line, but they were able to get to the rim, and that's totally fine. Quinn gets kind of put in a box about more threes, and he wants that, but he always says they also want rim attempts, and they got those in that stretch. Crazy stat here, by the way. So the top 7 guys for the Hawks in minutes had double figures with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. Then Okongwu got it by the end of the third quarter. The Hawks only had 8 guys score double figures in a full game twice all year last year. And tonight they did it in the first 3 quarters. How about this one from Elias Sports via Hawks PR? The Hawks have only had this happen twice, including tonight. This is the second time ever in the play-by-play era of the NBA that the Hawks had 8 guys score double figures by the end of the third quarter. The other time was in 2004, and I was graduating from high school. So I'm a pretty old man. That's a long time ago. And it's pretty rare that you have 8 guys going double figures in the first 3 quarters of a game against a good team, no less. But basically, they played even in the third quarter. That's all I had to do because they were already up by 20-something points. They scored 101 points on 76 possessions for 3 quarters. That is excellent stuff. By the way, the Hawks have now scored 100 points or more in 60 straight games. That's a franchise record that keeps growing every time, so keep that in mind for the future. The Bucks made more shots in the second half, but that was not really going to be enough. And then from there, the fourth quarter was not fully garbage time, but the last 7 minutes were. So it got a little bit dicey one more time. It got down to 17. They actually had a shot in the air to go to 14. It didn't go in. And then Bogey had a dunk, and then Bogey shot this no-dip 3 that I tweeted about. And I know the Hawks Bally account shared it. It was beautiful. If you don't know what that means, basically Bogey caught the ball and shot it in basically one motion without going down. And it was just a thing of beauty. And Bogey is dynamic when he's dialed in. And then Trae hit back-to-back threes to kind of end the game, going by 26 points. I thought Milwaukee's going to pull the plug there. They actually didn't, but it ended up being an 11-0 run by the Hawks to go up by 31 points, and that was going to be the end of that. Giannis came out, et cetera, et cetera. I was confused by one thing, and that's that Bogey played way more in the fourth than he probably should have on a back-to-back. I don't know if he's going to take off tomorrow or what's going to happen, but that was a little bit strange to me. But they were able to rest Capella because back-to-backs, the guys that I would always circle on those are Capella and Bogey for just minutes and, age reasons and wear and tear reasons. But they were able to kind of go pretty deep into the bench. NBA debuts for Kobe Buffkin and Mohamed Gay. So congratulations to those guys getting on the floor for the first time. But it was heavy bench stuff down the stretch and not a whole lot to add there. But, big picture again, before we dive into the player stuff in a second, just an awesome performance from the Hawks. Everyone played well. They were in control the entire way. And there are a couple of questionable moments when it got a little bit tighter. The Hawks immediately, to their credit, stomped that out. And that was kind of the end of that. And no real runs from Milwaukee outside the first, that one in the first half. And, hat tips all around. Everyone was, great vibes after the game, et cetera. So we'll leave it there for now. Touch on the players in a second. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into the action this NFL or NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're a new customer, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Beyond the awesome perks of signing up right now with FanDuel, they have all the stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space. That includes point spreads, over-unders, money lines, player props, future bets, and much more. The app is safe and secure. They cover the entire range of sporting offerings. That includes the NFL, college football, of course, NBA, MLB, college basketball, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, much more. It's all there for you at FanDuel. They have all kinds of Hawk stuff as well, including the full scope of offerings for the game on Monday against the Wolves that we'll cover in depth tomorrow. And now is the best possible time to join up at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check out the official sports partner of the Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you will absolutely not want to miss. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, to the player-by-player evaluations. And as I mentioned before, pretty much everybody played well. So the garbage time guys, I don't have a lot to say about. Bruno played 5 minutes and Mohamed Gay played 3 minutes. A little bit rough from Mohamed Gay, I thought, but obviously a little bit, probably some nerves there, and the game was kind of over. Trent Forrest, 5 minutes. Kobe Buffkin, 3 minutes. Not a lot to say there. AJ Griffin played 10 minutes. I thought he looked pretty good, actually. 6 points, 2 of 2 from 3, had an assist, had a steal. People are there's kind of a fine line here because you want AJ to play, but I don't mind it being that matchup based. I think there's not really a lot of danger of him just never playing, but I do think that it would be better if he played more, probably in an ideal world. But I always get it. He is their ninth guy right now, and that's okay. I think he'll play more than he did tonight regularly, if I had to guess. But I thought he looked good when he was out there. He was aggressive. That's all you want to see from him. To the guys who played more in this one, Bogey played 26 minutes, had 17 points and 6 assists, 2 steals. I thought he looked very, very good in this game. 4 of 7 from 3. 2 of 3 from inside the arc. Played decent enough defensively. He was aggressive as a shooter. I've always said Bogey raises their ceiling. He's kind of their only guy that plays the way he does on this team as a pure, wing sniper. He's really aggressive when he's got it going. He's a good passer, good facilitator, obviously a great shooter. And I thought he looked great in this game. Saddiq Bey was much, much better. I thought he struggled a lot on Friday. He was good. He was actually good in this game on both ends of the floor. 13 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists for Saddiq. Got to the line 5 times. Passed up a couple shots in the first half, but I thought he looked pretty good. Plus 23 in 31 minutes. He played a starter workload because of the foul trouble that the Hawks had in this one with Jalen and even with DeAndre early on. But I thought he looked very good, and good to see him. Obviously no sulking there. Like, he didn't start in this game. Some guys would maybe get lost, and he didn't. He played great, actually, I thought. And then Okongwu, 14 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal for Onyeka. Had 4 fouls, as he kind of always seems to. But 0-2 on threes, but 7-9 on twos. I thought he actually was a little bit shaky in the first stint or two that he played, but after that he got settled in and played very well. Obviously, Okongwu always plays well against the Bucks. It feels like, not that anybody stops Giannis. Giannis had a good game in this one statistically, but I thought that Okongwu at least did his job in this one and showed out very well, as again everybody did. To the starters in this game, Hunter, I thought, quietly 15 points, 4 steals. Now that's not a small thing. Hunter has never been a havoc creator defensively. I think he does a lot of small things defensively that get underutilized or maybe underappreciated, but he's never been a blocks and steals guy. And 4 steals for him is actually a really good development. 15 points on 10 shots. I think he's looked good the last couple games. I know he was not very good against Charlotte in the opener, and a lot of Hawks fans reacted to that, but I think last 2 games he's been very good. That's good to see. Jalen Johnson, 14 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals and a block in his first career start. Plus 14, 2 or 3 from 3, 6 or 7 from the floor. He was really good other than the fouls early in the third quarter. And even then, I think at least one of those was kind of ticky-tack. I don't have a lot more to add. He looked good. He's looked good the entire time. I think there's probably a tendency to be a little bit too excited, but I'm not even going to try to slow people down at this point. I think that people are rightly excited. He's a very young player with a sky-high ceiling. He's already playing well. The half-court stuff's sometimes a little bit funny, but he's attacking mismatches. He's doing what you want him to do, and love to see it on all accounts. Clint Capella. I thought he was really good. I mentioned it earlier, but Snyder credit his defense already with what they were able to do against Lillard, etc. He had a couple of bad moments in the first 3 minutes. And then the rest of the way, I thought he was exceptionally good defensively, and offensively, he was just fine. 12 points, 12 rebounds in 23 minutes, had a steal, had an assist. No turnovers is key for him. He blew the one bunny, but after the bad hook shot, I think he was 5 of 6 or 5 of 7 from the floor. So had actually one really nice knifing in finish around the rim. I think it gets overstated that he's this bad finisher. He's not really a bad finisher. He's a bad shooter for sure, and doesn't have great hands, all that stuff. But anyway, I thought Capella was good in this game. And I know people kind of decided that he's bad. I don't really understand that. But after what I said was really bad ending on Friday and a bad start tonight, he settled in, looked good. And then Trae and Dejounte, neither of whom had gaudy numbers offensively by their standards. I want to go to Murray now. Snyder said, and I quote, that he did a, quote, terrific job. Talks about how picking up his pickup points higher on defense against Lillard was really important. He talks about how Murray was really focused. He also said that Murray and Trae have both been, quote, unbelievably coachable, which goes against the national narrative, let's just say, about Trae Young that gets out of control. I was actually happy to hear that from Quinn, because it's kind of been what I've been hearing behind the scenes too, that Trae is really bought in and actually being coachable. So hopefully people will spread the word on that a little bit. But back to Dejounte, I thought Dejounte's defense was great, as I mentioned before. Plus 26, best on the team. I think he earned that in this game. He was still 1 of 5 from 3. He wasn't incredible offensively. 15 points, 5 assists. He wasn't bad. I thought he was better. It certainly was more efficient tonight than he had been the first 2 games. But defensively, that's what you want from him. I've been saying this for a while. His defense is really, really important. Both he and Hunter, but I think especially Murray, they can't afford for him to be bad defensively. And he was bad for a lot of the time last year. And he was really engaged tonight. I thought Quinn rightly praised him for that. And really good to see that at the point of attack. And I'm sure he was up for the matchup. You're facing Dan Lillard. Obviously, you're going to be competitive and have your juices flowing, but we'll see how he responds on Monday. But I thought Murray was very good. And then Trae. So other than the unbelievably coachable part, Snyder also credited Trae for staying engaged, not getting discouraged after the slow start. He said his poise was quote unquote terrific. I agree with that. And again, I tweeted this tonight. People were kind of confused by it because of his poor shooting numbers, because Trae was 5 of 14 from the floor in this game, which is obviously not good. But he got to the line 9 times. So he had 20 points on 18 shooting possessions. That's not good, but Trae, I've always said this, I'll say it again now. Trae is not a guy that you can just gauge his efficiency based on his field goal percentage. That's the difference between Trae and a lot of guys. Number 1, he takes a lot of threes. Number 2, he gets to the line a lot. So that helps to boost your efficiency. So no one's saying he's going to be 5 of 14 on the floor all the time, because if he is, that wouldn't be good. But he was 3 of 8 from 3, 9 free throw attempts. But even beyond all of that, I thought he was in total command. after his first stint or two. He was not good in the first quarter, I don't think, offensively. But after that, 11 assists, 3 turnovers. The Bucks had no answer for him whatsoever. He was breaking the paint. He was creating rotations from the defense. He found a shot a little bit later on, which is good to see. And, I talked about this a little bit on Friday. He is a slow starter as a shooter historically. His worst numbers come in October. That, we're almost to November. I'm sure he's happy to see that. But all joking aside, I thought Trae was really good after the first quarter. And that's not a small thing. And look, they have to have Trae and Dejounte be better than they were in the first 2 games. That's a small bar to clear, but they had to be better than that, and they were. That's not the reason they won this game. There were many reasons, and again, I just named all 8 guys. They all played well in this one, and I really actually believe that. There were different degrees, but no one played poorly. I can usually find someone that I'm like, that guy was okay. Everyone was good in this game, I thought, and that's maybe what leads you to a 17-point win that was really more like a 30-point win in a lot of ways on the road. Okay, that's it for this particular game. I do have a couple of things to touch on at the end of the podcast. First, this is a quick turnaround for the Hawks. The Hawks play on Monday at home against Minnesota. That's a pretty tough back-to-back with a pretty long flight in the middle of it, and the Wolves were off today. So a pretty tough schedule spot, let's say. And I know people always roll their eyes. I know it's early in the season. I get that. Guys are a little bit fresher in terms of their legs right now than they will be in a couple of weeks and months. But still, back-to-backs are back-to-backs. They're hard. In fact, right now, FanDuel has the Hawks as a small underdog on Monday, but about a point or a point and a half. Again, probably because Minnesota is, a roughly similar team, in my opinion, to the Hawks, like projection-wise. I think in their regular season wins projections, they were maybe a little bit ahead of the Hawks, but somewhere in that same range. But it's an advantage to be off today when other team is playing a game in Milwaukee and having to travel. So keep an eye on that. We'll have full coverage of that game afterwards, but kind of a coin flip game and a nice little test as the Hawks come back home after this really high on the road in Milwaukee. And then last thing, I got a few questions about this actually after the game on Friday. There was a show that popped up in the audio-only podcast feed. So if you're a YouTube watcher, you probably didn't see this, but if you are subscribed to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts, etc., there was a postcast show in there. I'm told by the Locked On Podcast Network, which is, of course, who hosts this podcast, that's going to be happening after games this year. So I'm not the host of that show. I will not be really involved in that show, to my knowledge. So it might be quite different than what you're used to with me. I'm not entirely sure, but it's in the family of the network with Locked On Sports Atlanta crew. And if you're an audio-only subscriber to Apple, again, Spotify, Google Podcasts, you're going to see that show at times. So I want to let everybody know that. Don't be shocked or discouraged by that. Check it out if you'd like to. And also, it doesn't change the offers for me. I'm still going to be here and I've already been here for almost 1,600 episodes of this podcast over 7+ years. Keep it locked in. Obviously, please subscribe to the podcast. So no changes. I'm not being pushed out, anything like that. I got a panic question from a listener that was worried that I was going to be leaving. I'm not leaving. That show is a bonus, basically, in your podcast feed. Not by me, but still under the same network umbrella. So check out the show. Tell your friends. And please subscribe to the podcast. Ratings and reviews, always appreciated. I also write about the Hawks at times. Patreon.com/BT Rowland. You can follow me on Twitter as well at BT Rowland, or follow the show on Twitter /X at Locked On Hawks. Again, keep it locked here, everybody. Really appreciate all the support. And we'll have a new show in less than 24 hours as the Hawks return home on Monday evening against the Wolves. So stay tuned. We'll see you all next time.